I used to think I was a good man. I used to believe that deep down, beneath my competitive streak and my sharp tongue, I had a decent heart, that I would never deliberately hurt someone I loved, that when it truly mattered, I would choose kindness over cruelty. I was wrong. I was so terribly, devastatingly wrong. And the worst part is that I cannot blame alcohol. I cannot blame stress or temporary insanity or some moment of passion that clouded my judgment. I knew exactly what I was doing when I opened my mouth. I knew the words would destroy her, and I said them anyway, all because I wanted to win one stupid fight. My name is Marcus Reed. I am 38 years old, and I am the man who exposed my wife's deepest secret to her entire family, to her colleagues, to everyone she cared about, because she refused to admit that I was right about something that, looking back now, meant absolutely nothing. I sit here recording this not to ask for sympathy, because I deserve none. I am recording this because I need the world to know what happens when you let pride consume you, when you weaponize the trust someone gave you, when you forget that being right is never more important than being kind. Evelyn and I met 7 years ago at a corporate networking event in Manchester. I was there representing my company's sales division. She was there as a senior accountant for a mid-sized consulting firm. I noticed her immediately, not because she was trying to be noticed, but precisely because she was not. While everyone else in the room was performing, projecting confidence, working the crowd with rehearsed smiles and polished pitches, Evelyn stood near the back, nursing a glass of sparkling water, observing everything with those sharp, intelligent eyes. There was something about her stillness that drew me in, something about the way she seemed completely self-contained, as if she needed nothing from anyone in that room. I approached her with what I thought was my most charming introduction. She responded with polite indifference. I tried harder. She remained unimpressed. By the end of the evening, I had somehow managed to make her laugh exactly once, and that single laugh felt like the greatest achievement of my life. I asked for her number. She hesitated for a long moment, studying my face as if she was trying to read something written beneath my skin. Then she said, "I do not give my number to strangers at networking events." My heart sank, but then she smiled just slightly and added, "But I suppose you could give me yours. And if I feel like calling, I will." She called 3 weeks later. 3 weeks of me checking my phone obsessively, convinced I had imagined the entire interaction. When her name appeared on my screen, I felt a rush of joy that I had not experienced since childhood. Our first date lasted 6 hours. Our second date lasted an entire weekend. Within 3 months, I knew I wanted to marry her. Within a year, I did. The early years of our marriage were everything I had dreamed of. Evelyn was brilliant, funny in a quiet and understated way, and fiercely independent. She never needed me to complete her, and somehow that made me want to be worthy of her all the more. We built a life together in Birmingham, a beautiful Victorian townhouse that she decorated with meticulous care. We talked about children but agreed to wait until we were both ready. We traveled when we could. We built traditions, Saturday morning farmers markets, Sunday evening films, Wednesday night dinners where we cooked together and talked about everything and nothing. I thought I understood her completely. I thought I knew every corner of her heart. But there was one room in Evelyn's heart that remained locked. One subject that, whenever I approached it, caused her entire body to tense, her eyes to become distant, her voice to grow quiet. Her childhood, her family. The years before I knew her, I learned early in our relationship that Evelyn's childhood had been difficult. She mentioned it only once during our courtship, in the vaguest possible terms. "I did not have an easy start," she told me one evening, when I asked about her parents. "My mother did her best, but she was not well, and my father was not in the picture. I do not like to talk about it, Marcus. It was a long time ago. I am not that person anymore." I respected her boundaries. I did not push. I told myself that when she was ready, she would share more with me. I told myself that everyone deserves to keep certain parts of themselves private, even from a spouse. But the truth, the full truth, came to me unexpectedly 2 years into our marriage. It was a Tuesday evening. Evelyn had received a phone call from her mother, who lived in a care facility in Leeds. The call had lasted only a few minutes, but when Evelyn hung up, she was shaking. Her face was pale. Her hands trembled so violently that she could not hold her cup of tea. I had never seen her like that. I held her, asked her what was wrong, told her she could tell me anything. And that night, for the first and only time, she told me everything. When Evelyn was 11 years old, her mother suffered a complete mental breakdown. The details Evelyn shared were sparse but devastating. Her mother had been diagnosed with a severe psychiatric condition that went untreated for years. During one particularly bad episode, her mother had left Evelyn alone in their flat for 9 days. 9 days without food, without electricity, without any contact with the outside world. By the time authorities found her, Evelyn was severely malnourished and traumatized. She spent the next 7 years in foster care, moving between 12 different homes, never staying anywhere long enough to feel safe. But that was not the secret. The secret, the thing Evelyn had never told anyone except me, the thing she made me swear on everything I held sacred that I would never reveal, was what happened in one of those foster homes. She was 14. The family seemed kind at first, normal, safe. But the father of that family was a predator. For 8 months, Evelyn endured unspeakable abuse. She told no one. She believed no one would believe her. When she finally ran away at 15, she spent 3 months living on the streets before a social worker found her and placed her in a group home. She told me all of this in a voice barely above a whisper. And when she finished, she looked at me with such fear, such vulnerability, such desperate hope that I would not see her differently. I held her face in my hands. I told her that she was the bravest person I had ever known. I told her that what happened to her was not her fault, would never be her fault, and that I loved her more than I had loved her before she told me. I promised her, on my life, that her secret would die with me, that no one would ever hear those words from my lips. And for 4 years, I kept that promise. For 4 years, I protected her story as if it were my own. I defended her when my family wondered why she was always so distant at gatherings. I explained away her reluctance to discuss her past as simple privacy. I built a wall around her secret, and I stood guard at the gate. But then came the fight. The stupid, pointless, meaningless fight that destroyed everything. It started, as so many fights do, with something trivial. We were hosting a dinner party for several of my colleagues and their spouses. Evelyn had been working late all week, exhausted from a difficult audit at her firm. I had been stressed about a major sales presentation that was not going well. Neither of us was at our best. The dinner was meant to be a distraction, a chance to socialize, to pretend everything was fine. The argument began over the appetizers. I had asked Evelyn to prepare her signature bruschetta, the one everyone always raved about. She had forgotten. In the chaos of her work week, she had simply forgotten. So we served store-bought appetizers instead. It was nothing. It meant nothing. But when Derek complimented the food and asked if Evelyn had made the bruschetta herself, I made a comment. A small, petty, passive-aggressive comment about how some of us keep our promises and some of us do not. I saw the hurt flash across Evelyn's face. I saw it, and I felt a small, shameful satisfaction. In that moment, I wanted to hurt her. I wanted her to feel as stressed and overlooked as I had felt all week. She said nothing during the dinner. She smiled and laughed and played the perfect hostess. But when the guests left, the dam broke. She confronted me in the kitchen, her voice low and controlled, which was always more frightening than if she had shouted. She asked me why I had humiliated her in front of my colleagues. I told her she was being dramatic. She asked me if I understood how hard she had been working, how exhausted she was, how much pressure she was under. I told her that everyone was under pressure and that she was not special. Those words. You are not special. I watched them land. I watched her flinch as if I had struck her. And instead of apologizing, instead of taking back what I had said, I doubled down. I told her that she always played the victim, that she always expected everyone to walk on eggshells around her, that she used her past as an excuse for everything. Evelyn went very still. My past, she repeated, and there was something dangerous in her voice now. What exactly do you know about my past, Marcus? I should have stopped. Any reasonable person would have stopped. But I was not reasonable. I was angry and wounded and determined to win. I know everything, I said. I know about your mother. I know about the foster homes. I know about what happened when you were 14, and I am tired of being held hostage by your trauma. The silence that followed was absolute. Evelyn stared at me as if she was seeing me for the first time. And what she saw, I realized with slowly dawning horror, was a monster. You promised, she said finally, and her voice cracked. You promised you would never use that against me. I am not using it against you, I said, still trying to justify myself, still too proud to admit what I had done. I am just stating facts. You cannot keep hiding behind what happened to you 20 years ago. Evelyn nodded slowly. She picked up her phone from the counter, and then she did something I never expected. She called her mother. Right there in our kitchen, at 11 o'clock at night, she called the care facility where her mother lived. When the night nurse answered, Evelyn asked to speak to Linda, her mother, and she waited silent until the connection was made. Mum, Evelyn said, her voice steady now, though I could see her hands shaking. I need to tell you something. Marcus knows. He knows everything. And he just threw it in my face during an argument. She paused, listening. No, I am not okay, but I will be. I just needed you to know that the secret is not safe anymore. She ended the call. She looked at me with eyes that held nothing. No anger, no hurt, just emptiness. You have broken something that cannot be fixed, she said. I hope winning this argument was worth it. She walked out of the kitchen. I heard her footsteps on the stairs. I heard our bedroom door close. And I stood there, alone, finally understanding the magnitude of what I had done. But I did not understand. Not truly. Not yet. The full weight of my actions would not become clear until the following week, when everything began to unravel. It started with Naomi. Naomi Clark was Evelyn's closest friend, her college roommate, the one person outside of me who knew Evelyn's history. Naomi called me 4 days after the fight, and her voice was ice. What have you done? She asked. Before I could respond, she continued. Evelyn told me everything. She told me what you said. Marcus, do you have any idea what kind of person does something like that? Do you understand that you used the most painful thing that ever happened to her as a weapon? That you violated her trust in the most fundamental way possible? I tried to explain. I tried to say that I had not meant it, that I had been angry, that I had not actually told anyone else. Naomi cut me off. It does not matter that you did not tell anyone else, she said. You proved to her that her secret was not safe with you. You proved that at any moment, if you were angry enough, you could destroy her. Do you know what that feels like for someone who has already been destroyed once? Do you have any idea? I did not, but I was beginning to learn. Evelyn did not leave me. Not immediately. She stayed in our home, but she moved into the guest bedroom. She spoke to me only when necessary, her voice polite and distant, as if I were a stranger she was forced to share space with. I apologized. I apologized 1,000 times in 1,000 different ways. I wrote letters. I bought flowers. I begged her to go to couples counseling. She refused everything. Words cannot fix this, she said, the one time she agreed to discuss it. You did not just break a promise, Marcus. You showed me who you are, and I cannot unsee that. I thought she was being unfair. I thought she was overreacting. I told myself that everyone says things they do not mean in arguments, that she was punishing me disproportionately, that eventually she would forgive me and we would move on. But then my sister Patricia came to visit. Patricia, the family therapist, the one who could see through every excuse and justification I had ever made. She sat me down in my own living room and she looked at me with an expression I had never seen from her before. Disappointment so profound it bordered on disgust. I spoke to Evelyn, Patricia said. She told me what happened. She told me what you said. My stomach dropped. She told you about her past? No, Patricia said. She did not tell me the details. She only told me that she had shared something deeply personal with you, something traumatic, and that you used it against her in a moment of anger. That was enough. Marcus, I have spent my entire career working with trauma survivors. Do you have any idea how rare it is for someone to trust another person with their deepest pain? Do you understand what it takes for them to be that vulnerable? I said nothing. When she told you her secret, Patricia continued, she was giving you the most precious thing she had. She was saying, I trust you to hold this gently. I trust you not to hurt me with this. And what you did, Marcus, what you did was prove to her that her trust was misplaced. You did not just hurt her. You confirmed her worst fear, the fear that she has probably carried since she was a child. The fear that if people really knew her, if they knew what happened to her, they would use it to destroy her. I did not mean to destroy her, I said, and my voice broke. I was just angry. I just wanted to win the argument. Patricia shook her head. And was it worth it? Did you win? No. No, I had not won. I had lost everything. The next few months were the darkest of my life. Evelyn began the process of extracting herself from our marriage with clinical efficiency. She found an apartment. She consulted a solicitor. She divided our assets with mathematical precision. She never shouted at me. She never cried in front of me. She simply treated me as someone who no longer existed in any meaningful sense. But the consequences did not end with my marriage. Word spread, as it always does. Naomi told other people what I had done, not the specific secret, but the fact that I had violated my wife's trust in the cruelest possible way. My reputation, both professionally and personally, began to shift. Derek, my closest friend, pulled me aside at work one day and told me that he was worried about me, but also that he was struggling to respect me. What kind of man uses his wife's trauma against her? He asked. That is not the Marcus I thought I knew. My colleagues looked at me differently. My family spoke to me less frequently. Even my mother, who had always taken my side in every conflict, refused to defend me this time. Evelyn was always too good for you, she said bluntly during a Sunday dinner. And you proved it. I wanted to explain. I wanted everyone to understand that I had made one mistake, one terrible mistake, in an otherwise loving marriage. But I began to realize that this was not how others saw it. They saw the mistake as a revelation of character. They saw it as proof of who I really was underneath the charm and the success and the polished exterior. A man who could not be trusted with vulnerability. A man who would hurt the people closest to him if his ego was bruised. And the worst part, the thing that kept me awake at night, was that I could not argue with them. Because they were right. In that moment, in that kitchen, I had revealed something true about myself. Something I did not want to see. I was a man who needed to win more than he needed to love. I was a man who valued his pride more than his wife's safety. I was a man who could hold a sacred trust in his hands and shatter it without hesitation if it served his purposes in the moment. The divorce was finalized 6 months after the fight. Evelyn was generous in the settlement, far more generous than I deserved. She asked for nothing except her freedom. When I saw her for the final time at the solicitor's office, I tried one last time to apologize. I know you do not want to hear this, I said, but I need you to know that I understand now. What I did was unforgivable. I weaponized your pain. I made you feel unsafe in your own marriage, and I will spend the rest of my life regretting it. Evelyn looked at me for a long moment, and when she spoke, her voice was not angry. It was not even sad. It was simply tired. The hardest part, she said, was not that you told my secret. The hardest part was realizing that you were capable of it. That all along for 4 years I had been sleeping next to someone who could hurt me that badly. That is what I cannot forgive, Marcus. Not the words you said, the person you turned out to be. She signed the final documents. She shook my hand, a gesture so formal and distant that it felt like a funeral. And then she walked out of my life forever. But this is not where the story ends. Because karma, I have learned, does not operate on our timeline. Karma waits, karma observes, and karma delivers its judgment when we least expect it. 18 months after my divorce, I met someone new. Her name was Caroline, a marketing executive at a competing firm. She was sharp, ambitious, attractive, everything I thought I wanted. We dated for 8 months. I was careful with her, or so I thought. I never raised my voice. I never said anything cruel. I was determined to prove to myself and to the world that I had changed. But one evening, during a minor disagreement about holiday plans, Caroline said something that stopped me cold. "You know," she said, "sometimes when we argue, I see this look in your eyes. Like you are calculating. Like you are looking for the thing that will hurt me most. It frightens me, Marcus." I denied it. I told her she was imagining things. But that night, lying in bed, I could not sleep. Because I knew she was right. That impulse, that dark competitive instinct to find the weakness and exploit it, was still there. I had not changed. I had just become better at hiding it. Caroline ended things 2 weeks later. "I do not feel safe with you," she said. "And I cannot explain why, because you have never actually done anything. But I trust my instincts. And my instincts tell me to run." I wanted to be angry. I wanted to feel wronged. But all I felt was a crushing sense of recognition. This was my karma. Not some external punishment delivered by the universe, but the natural consequence of who I had allowed myself to become. A man who made people feel unsafe. A man whose love came with conditions. A man who could not be trusted with the fragile parts of other people. I started therapy. Real therapy. Not the couples counseling I had once suggested as a performance of concern. I sat in a small office every week and I dug into the ugliest parts of myself. I talked about my father, who had praised winning above everything else. I talked about my childhood, where love was always conditional on achievement. I talked about the terror I felt whenever I was losing, the way my entire sense of self collapsed if I was not on top. And slowly, painfully, I began to understand how that terror had warped me. How my need to win had become more important than my capacity to love. 2 years after my divorce, I reached out to Evelyn. Not to apologize again, because I knew my apologies meant nothing to her, but to ask a question that had been haunting me. I sent a letter to her office, formal and brief. I asked if she would be willing to meet me for coffee. I told her I understood if she said no. To my shock, she agreed. We met at a small cafe in Manchester, neutral territory. Evelyn looked different, lighter somehow, as if a weight had been lifted from her shoulders. She told me that she was doing well. She had been promoted at her firm. She had started volunteering with a charity that supported foster children. She had even reconnected with her mother, whose health had stabilized enough to allow for regular visits. She was, for the first time in her life, genuinely happy. I asked her the question I had been carrying. "Did you ever tell anyone else?" "Your secret, after what I did." Evelyn was quiet for a moment. Then she nodded. "I did. I told Naomi the full story, not just the parts she already knew. I told my therapist, and 6 months ago, I told the police." I stared at her. "The man who abused me," Evelyn said, her voice steady, "is still alive. He is in his 70s now. He has grandchildren. He is seen by his community as a kind and respectable man. I never reported him because I was too afraid, too ashamed. I thought the secret was my burden to carry." She met my eyes. "But what you did, Marcus, the way you threw my trauma in my face, it forced me to confront something. I realized that keeping the secret was not protecting me. It was protecting him. And I decided that I was done protecting him." The man was arrested 3 months after Evelyn's statement. 2 other women came forward with similar accusations. The case went to trial. He was convicted and sentenced to 12 years in prison. Evelyn testified publicly using her real name. And when it was over, she told the press, "Silence protects abusers. I was silent for 20 years. I will not be silent anymore." I sat in that cafe, listening to my ex-wife describe her journey from victim to survivor to advocate, and I felt something I had never expected. Gratitude. Not for what I had done, which remained unforgivable, but for the fact that something good had emerged from my cruelty. Evelyn had taken the worst thing I did to her and transformed it into fuel for justice. "I do not forgive you," Evelyn said, as if reading my thoughts. "I want to be clear about that. What you did was a betrayal, and I will carry that wound for the rest of my life. But I have stopped hating you, Marcus. Hating you took too much energy, and I have better things to do with my energy now." I nodded. I thanked her for meeting me, and then I said the only thing I could say. "I am proud of you, Evelyn, for everything you have become." She smiled just slightly, that same small smile she had given me the night we met. "Goodbye, Marcus," she said, and she walked out of the cafe, out of my life, into a future that had nothing to do with me. I am recording this story now, 3 years after that final meeting. I am still in therapy. I am still working on becoming the kind of person who deserves to be trusted. I have not dated anyone seriously since Caroline. I am not sure I am ready. I am not sure I have finished the work of unmaking the man I used to be. But I share this story because I want everyone listening to understand something. When someone trusts you with their pain, with their secrets, with the parts of themselves they have hidden from the world, that is not ammunition. That is not leverage. That is a sacred responsibility. And if you violate that trust, if you use that vulnerability as a weapon, you do not just hurt them. You reveal something about yourself that cannot be unseen.